The year is 2012. The room is a bank boardroom. Glass, steel, and silence. David Chen, the bank's new president, is reviewing a file. The bank's largest private depositor. The name is Alara Vance. The number next to the name makes him pause. He reads it again. 7 figures. Liquid. He scrolls through her file history. Mostly just deposits. Large ones. Year after year. Then he sees it. A scanned document from 1982. A loan application. For $50,000. The status is stamped in red ink. Denied. At the bottom, there is a handwritten note. From the loan officer at the time, a man named Frank Miller. David leans closer to his screen. The note reads, "Applicant has passion, good family, but 80 acres of marginal land is a hobby, not a viable commercial enterprise. Recommending denial to prevent future hardship for the young woman." David Chen goes still. He looks at the current balance again. $2.7 million. He looks back at the note on the screen. A hobby. The word hangs in the air-conditioned silence. A hobby that had become the financial bedrock of his institution. A hobby that had, a decade earlier, saved this very bank. He felt a gap open up in the room. A chasm between the kindness of that note and the power of that number. A story he did not know. A story he needed to understand. This channel is about those gaps. We tell the stories of people who were told no. The ones who were written off. The ones who were dismissed with kindness. The ones who spent a lifetime quietly proving the world wrong. If you believe those stories matter, subscribe. Because the story of Alara Vance is not just about money. It's about what happens when someone tries to protect you from your own potential, and what it takes to disprove them. Let's go back. To March of 1982. The economy was a fist, squeezing the life out of family farms. Interest rates were a fever. Corn prices were in the basement. Alara Vance knew this squeeze firsthand. Her family's 640-acre farm had been sold off 3 years before, auctioned on the courthouse steps. First the equipment, the John Deere 4440, her father's pride, gone. The Gleaner combine, gone. Then the land itself, section by section, lost to neighbors, to investors, to the bank. Her father, a man who had seemed as permanent as the seasons, was broken by it. He still worked, but the light in his eyes was gone. Alara was 24 years old. She had a horticulture degree from the State University. She had hands that knew the ache of real work. And she had a deed to 80 acres. Land her grandmother had left to her, and only her. It wasn't prime land. It was hilly, the soil thin and rocky in places. The kind of land people called the goat pasture. It had not been farmed seriously in 50 years, but it was hers, free and clear. The only piece of the family legacy the bankers couldn't touch. She had an idea. For the time, it was a radical one. High-density orchards, apples and peaches, grown on dwarfing rootstock, trellised like grapevines. It was a system they were trying in Washington, in New Zealand, not here, not in the heart of corn and soy country. The plan required capital, a well, a pump, miles of irrigation lines, thousands of young trees, thousands of trellis posts, and miles of wire. She drew up the plans herself. A 10-year projection, a detailed budget, soil tests she'd paid for with her savings. She put on her only good dress, a simple blue one. She drove her father's rusty Ford pickup into town. She walked into the First National Bank of Mercer County, the same bank that held the ghosts of her family's notes. She was there to ask for a loan. She was there to see a man named Frank Miller. Frank Miller's office was paneled in dark wood. It smelled of coffee and responsibility. A picture of his wife and two sons sat on the corner of his desk. A plaque for sponsoring the town's Little League team hung on the wall. Frank Miller was a pillar of the community. He served on the church board. He was fair. He was decent. He was trusted. He smiled a warm, paternal smile. "Please, Alara, have a seat." He had known her family for decades. He said he was sorry about what happened to her father's farm. "A real shame," he said. "Just a tragedy." He listened with genuine interest as she laid out her plan. He didn't rush her. He studied her binders full of research. He looked at the soil maps, the yield projections. He nodded. He asked intelligent questions about chilling hours for the peaches, about fire blight resistance in the apple varieties she'd chosen, about the market for fresh fruit versus processed juice. For 20 solid minutes, he took her seriously. Alara felt a small, dangerous flicker of hope. Finally, he leaned back in his creaking leather chair. He steepled his fingers under his chin. "Alara," he said, his voice soft, "this is a very, very impressive proposal. Truly. One of the best I've seen from someone your age. You've done your homework." He paused. It was a long, thoughtful pause, the kind of pause that precedes a kindness, or a killing blow. "But I cannot give you this loan." The hope inside her didn't just flicker, it was extinguished. It wasn't his words that hurt, it was the genuine concern in his eyes. "I've been an agricultural lender in this county for 30 years, he said. "My own father lost his farm in the Depression, in '36. I know what it looks like when good people with good ideas get in over their heads." He gestured to her meticulously prepared binders. "This is a beautiful dream, a wonderful dream, but these 80 acres, it's marginal land at best. The upfront investment is simply too high. The return on that investment is a decade away, if it comes at all." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "You'll have one bad frost in May, one summer drought that this soil can't handle, one bad outbreak of scab or blight, and you will be wiped out. You will lose this land, Alara. You'll lose the last piece of land your family has left. I am not going to be the man who signs the paper that lets that happen. I will not do that to your father's daughter." He saw it as an act of protection, an act of mercy. He slid her binder back across the polished desk. "My advice?" he said, his tone gentle, avuncular. "Sell the land. A developer would probably give you 30, maybe 40,000 for it. It's a nice spot for a few houses. Put that money in a certificate of deposit. Get a good, steady job in town. You're a smart young woman. Don't chain yourself to this heartbreak. This," he tapped her binder with his finger, "this is a hobby. A wonderful hobby, but it is not a business." He stood up then, signaling the meeting was over. He smiled that same warm, decent smile. He truly believed he had just saved her. He had no idea what he had just unleashed. She did not argue. She did not raise her voice. She certainly did not cry. She just nodded. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Miller." She gathered her binder and walked out into the afternoon sun. The blue dress felt like a foolish costume. She drove the 10 miles back to the farm. The binder sat on the passenger seat. A $50,000 dream, denied. Her father was in the machine shed. He was trying to weld a cracked frame on an old disc harrow. His knuckles were raw and black with grease. He looked up when she walked in. He saw her face. He shut off the welder. He didn't have to ask what happened. She told him anyway. She told him every word Frank Miller had said. She told him about the kindness, the concern, the final, devastating judgment. Hobby. The word just hung there in the dusty metallic air. Her father was silent for a long time. He picked up a red rag and slowly wiped his hands. He walked out of the dark shed into the light. Ilara followed him. He walked to the fence line, to the edge of her 80 acres. He bent down, a slow, painful motion. He scooped up a handful of the dark, clay-heavy soil. He crumbled it in his palm, letting it run through his calloused fingers. He looked at her, and his eyes were clear, clearer than she had seen them in 3 years. "They took the big farm," he said. His voice was quiet, but hard as stone. "They took the combines. They took the grain bins. They took the land our family broke. But they can't take this." He held up his hand, dirt clinging to the lines in his palm. "This is all that's left. But the dirt is enough." It was not a speech. It was not a pep talk. It was a statement of fundamental truth, a creed. The dirt is enough. In that moment, something inside Ilara shifted. The shame of the bank meeting curdled and hardened into resolve. The hurt from Frank Miller's kind refusal cooled into a single cold point of focus. The dirt is enough. That night, she went to the kitchen table. She opened her binder to the budget page. She took a black pen, and she drew a thick line through the $50,000 loan. She turned to a fresh, blank page. At the top, she wrote 2 words: Plan B. Plan B was not about asking for permission. It was about making a way. Ilara had $3,450. It was her life savings. It had to be enough. She did not buy certified 2-year-old saplings from a commercial nursery. She couldn't afford them. Instead, she drove her pickup 3 states west, to a university agricultural research station. They were clearing out a test plot of old rootstocks, varieties that had been deemed commercially unviable. M26, Budagovsky 9, Pajam 2. She bought 1,000 of them, for 10 cents apiece. They were just sticks, barely thicker than a pencil. She brought them home in buckets of damp sawdust. She spent that winter in her grandfather's dilapidated greenhouse, grafting. She drove the back roads of 3 counties. She took cuttings from old, forgotten apple trees, gnarled 100-year-old trees in abandoned farmsteads, a wolf river from a collapsed barnyard, a golden russet from behind a ruined schoolhouse, trees that had survived decades of neglect. No sprays, no pruning, no irrigation. She grafted their resilient wood onto her cheap rootstock. She did it with a simple grafting knife, a knife her grandfather had given her years ago. Its wooden handle was smooth with age. Its blade was worn thin. She did not buy a modern drip irrigation system. She spent her savings on renting a small backhoe for a week. She spent that spring reshaping the land. She walked the contours, marking them with flags. She dug swales, broad, shallow channels that followed the curves of the hills, designed to catch every drop of rain, to stop the water, to hold it, to let it sink deep into the thirsty clay. The neighbors who drove by slowed their trucks and stared. That Vance girl, digging ditches on a perfectly good hill. At the lowest points on the property, she dug 3 small ponds. She didn't buy plastic liners. She used the clay she had excavated. She worked it with water and her own 2 feet, puddling it until it was impermeable, an ancient technique. She planted her 1,000 grafted trees, not in perfect, straight, industrial rows, but along the high sides of the swales, where their roots could find the stored moisture. She did not buy commercial fertilizer. She sold her father's broken-down tiller for scrap. She used the money to buy 3 Jersey dairy cows and a roll of electric fence. She rotated them through the young orchard. Their manure fed the soil. Their grazing suppressed the weeds. Between the tree rows, she planted cover crops, clover to fix nitrogen, buckwheat to mine phosphorus. daikon radishes with roots that broke up the compacted clay. The soil began to change. The bees came back. The earthworms, long absent, reappeared. The ground softened, it darkened, it came alive. It was slow work. It was lonely work. Her back screamed. Her hands were a constant map of cuts and calluses. That first summer, 100 of the grafts failed. That next spring, a late frost killed the new buds on 200 more. But 700 of them lived. They held. They grew. Small, tentative leaves unfurled. The dirt was enough. Word gets around in a small town. It travels on the wires of gossip and observation. People talked. At the counter in the feed store, on the steps after church. The community split. Some watched her with a quiet, knowing respect. Old Man Hemlock, whose farm bordered hers to the west, showed up one afternoon. He parked his dusty International Harvester at the fence line. He just sat there in the cab for an hour, engine idling. He watched her wrestle a new trellis post into the ground by herself. Finally, he shut off the big diesel. He climbed down, his movements stiff with age. He walked over. "Your grandfather taught me how to plow with a team of mules," he said, not looking at her but at the trees. He wouldn't take a dime for it. He pointed a gnarled finger at the swale she had dug. "This is good work." He turned and walked back to his tractor. He drove away. The next morning, a nearly new gas-powered post-hole digger was sitting by her gate. There was no note. Others were not so generous. They were the voices of convention, of certainty. At the co-op, she heard them whispering as she walked by. "That Vance girl, still playing in the dirt, thinks she's better than us with her college ideas. She'll be flat broke in a year, mark my words." One man, a prominent farmer who had bought a piece of her father's old land at the auction, confronted her by the bags of seed corn. "You're making the rest of us look bad," he said. His tone wasn't angry, it was concerned. "Your field of weeds is going to blow into my clean-tilled soybeans. Those crazy ditches of yours are going to wash out the county road in the next big rain." He was not a bad man. He was just certain. Certain in the way Frank Miller had been certain. He was certain he knew the right way to farm, and this was not it. Ilara just looked at him, her face calm. "My weeds stay on my land," she said, "and my water stays on my land too." She paid for her bag of clover seed and walked out. Have you ever felt that? That quiet judgment from the world? When you are trying to build something new, something different, the world divides itself into the people who quietly leave you a tool at the gate and the people who loudly tell you you're doing it all wrong. They say they're just being practical. They say they're just trying to save you from yourself. But what they are really doing is defending the world they understand. They are protecting their own certainty. Drop a comment below if you've ever had to build something while the old world watched on, waiting for you to fail. Because what Ilara Vance did next wasn't just about growing apples. It was about proving that a different reality was possible all along. The story of the next 20 years is not a story of drama. It is a story of numbers, of quiet, relentless accumulation, the steady drumbeat of work, the patient rhythm of the seasons. 1987, the first real harvest. It was not much, just 200 bushels. She sold them from the back of her pickup at a farmer's market in the city. Her apples looked strange to people. They weren't the perfect, waxy, uniform red orbs from the grocery store. They were russeted, bumpy, oddly shaped. But they had a flavor that people had forgotten apples could have. People came back the next week. They asked for the lady with the funny-looking apples. She sold every single one. 1989. The harvest doubled. 400 bushels. She used the profits to buy a better used truck, a 3/4-ton Chevy C10. She paid for it in cash. 1992. The harvest hit 1,000 bushels. Her trees were maturing. The swales and ponds were working. While her neighbor's corn wilted in a dry August, her orchard was a deep, cool green. Her ponds were still half full. That fall, Old Man Hemlock passed away. His children, who lived in the city, wanted to sell his 40 acres quickly. They had an offer from a housing developer. Alara went to see them. She made a different offer. $60,000. It was more than the developer had offered. She paid it in cash. Now she had 120 acres. The dirt is enough. 1995. A mild drought settled over the county. Corn yields were down 20%. Her orchard thrived. The deep sunk water held in the soil was her insurance. She cleared another 20 acres of the new land. She planted peaches this time, Albertas and Red Havens, using the same grafting techniques, the same water harvesting earthworks. The doubters at the co-op were quieter now. They still watched. But they watched with a different kind of attention. 1998, the year of the big harvest. 5,000 bushels of apples, 2,000 bushels of peaches. She was no longer just selling at the farmer's market. Chefs from fine dining restaurants in the city were calling her. They wanted her golden russets, her northern spies, her wolf rivers. They paid a premium for the flavor, for the story. That year, she drove to the John Deere dealership. She bought a brand new 5400 series tractor. It wasn't the biggest on the lot, but it was hers. The dealer started to draw up the financing papers. She stopped him. "I'll be paying in cash." Frank Miller, the retired banker, would sometimes drive his Buick down the road past her farm. He'd see the new rows of trees marching up the hills. He'd see the green lushness in the dry heat of summer. He'd see the new tractor, the expanded packing shed. He never stopped. He just drove past, a silent witness to the hobby that refused to fail. 2001. The 150-acre farm to her east came up for sale. The owner was the same man who had confronted her in the feed store years ago. He was retiring. His children didn't want the farm. He came to her, hat in hand. A different man, humbled by time and falling commodity prices. He asked her if she might be interested. He named his price, $250,000. She looked at him for a long moment. She nodded. She wrote him a check from her farm account. Cash. Now she owned 270 acres. The dirt is enough. The reckoning came in the summer of 2002. It came not as a banker, but as a fungus, a virulent new strain of fire blight. It moved through the region's orchards like a judgment. The conventional monoculture orchards, the vast acreages of Red Delicious, Granny Smith, and Gala, were defenseless. Trees that had been healthy in June were scorched black by August. Leaves withered, branches died. Entire orchards were lost. It was an agricultural catastrophe. Farmers who were leveraged to the hilt with bank loans faced total ruin, and many of them held those loans at the First National Bank of Mercer County. The bank was in serious trouble. The foundation of its loan portfolio was literally rotting on the trees. The bank's new president was David Chen, the young man from the city. He was facing a wave of defaults that could collapse the 100-year-old institution. He needed liquidity. He needed a show of faith. He needed a major depositor to park a large sum of cash in the bank, to calm nerves, to stop a run. He scoured the bank's records, looking for a local success story, a financial anchor in the storm. He found a name, Alara Vance. Her farm, now called Vancroft Orchards, was an island of green in a sea of brown. Her diverse, resilient, old-world varieties had largely resisted the blight. Her healthy, living soil had given the trees the strength to fight it off. She had losses, yes, a few trees here and there, but her farm was healthy. Her harvest was secure, and her business was immensely profitable. David Chin drove his sedan out to her farm. He found her, not in a fancy office, but in the open-air packing shed, sorting apples alongside two young employees. She wore work jeans and a simple chambray shirt. Her hands, he noticed, were still a farmer's hands. He introduced himself. He explained the situation, the bank's situation, the community's. He asked her to consider making a significant long-term deposit to help stabilize the local economy, to save the very bank that had once told her no. He was nervous. He had done his homework. In his briefcase was a photocopy of her 1982 loan application. He decided on transparency. He pulled it out. He showed it to her. "I want you to know that I know our history," he said. He pointed to the faded, handwritten note at the bottom. Frank Miller's confident script. A hobby. Elara took the piece of paper from him. She looked at her own youthful, hopeful signature. She looked at the words that had defined her life. She was silent for a full minute. The only sound was the low hum of the packing shed's cooler. She looked up from the paper, at the earnest, worried young banker. A hobby, she repeated. The word was quiet, devoid of anger. A simple, devastating fact. He thought he was being kind. She looked past him, out the wide door of the shed, toward the hills she had healed. He genuinely believed he was protecting me from failure. That's the part that is so hard to fight. Not cruelty, not malice, but the sincere, well-intentioned certainty of a good man who is wrong. Proving someone like that wrong doesn't take an argument in an office. It takes a lifetime in the fields. She handed the paper back to David Chen. "I will help your bank," she said, "but not with a deposit. We are going to create a new kind of fund, and it is going to be on my terms." She did not simply give the bank her money. That would have been too easy. That would have just propped up the same old system, the system of certainty that had failed her and was now failing everyone else. Instead, she created something new. The Mercer County Agricultural Innovation Fund. She capitalized it herself, with $2 million, cash. The fund was administered by the bank, giving it stability. But its lending decisions were not made by bankers in suits. They were made by a three-person board: Elara Vance, a soil scientist from the state university, and a retired farmer who practiced holistic grazing. The fund did not give out large loans for more land or bigger equipment. It gave out microloans, $5,000, $10,000, $25,000, for ideas, for the hobbies. A loan for a young woman who wanted to build hoop houses for year-round salad greens. A loan for a young family that wanted to raise pastured turkeys. A loan for an established farmer who wanted to convert 100 acres from corn to perennial hazelnuts. The loan applications were not judged on credit scores or collateral. They were judged on the health of the applicant's soil plan, on the resilience of their business model, on the fire in their eyes. It was a fund for the people who would be told no by a man like Frank Miller. Over the next 15 years, that fund quietly transformed the agricultural landscape of the county. It launched dozens of small, profitable, resilient farms. It brought young people back to the land. It made the local food system stronger, more diverse, and more secure. Frank Miller passed away in 2008. His obituary in the local paper praised him as a pillar of the community, a kind man who helped countless people and protected them from risk. Elara went to his funeral. She sat in a pew at the back of the church. She listened to the stories of his decency, his generosity, and she knew they were all true. He was a good man, and his goodness, his certainty, had cost her. It had cost her years. It had forced her down a harder, lonelier road. But it had also given her something priceless. It had given her a resolve that could not be broken. It had forced her to innovate, to be self-sufficient. It had forced her to trust the dirt, not the dollar. Today, if you visit Vancroft Orchards, Alara is no longer in the fields every day. Her son now manages the operation. He's expanding into hard cider. You will find Alara in a small, sunlit office in a converted barn. On the wall behind her desk, mounted on a piece of weathered cherry wood, is a small, simple knife. A grafting knife. Its blade is worn thin and curved from 1,000 cuts, from 1,000 moments of creating something new from what was discarded. It is the knife her grandfather gave her. It is the tool she used to build an empire from sticks. Sometimes, a young farmer, nervous and hopeful, their application for the Innovation Fund in hand, will ask her about that knife. She will take it down from the wall. She'll let them feel the smooth, worn handle. The story isn't about the money, she tells them. It's not even about the land. It's about this. It's about knowing that when all the doors are closed, you can still make your own way, with just your hands, and a blade, and the belief that the dirt is enough. The most dangerous limitation is not the one imposed by an enemy. It is the one imposed by a friend, by a good person who genuinely believes they are protecting you. That quiet, kind, confident no. It is more damaging than hostility, because you cannot fight it with anger. You can only disprove it, with decades of work, with calloused hands, with a stubborn belief in the soil beneath your feet. Right now, somewhere in this world, a young person with a brilliant idea is sitting across a desk from a good person who is about to say no. They are about to be told their dream is a hobby, that their plan is too risky, that they should be sensible. This story is for them. If this story meant something to you, if you believe in the power of disproving the doubters, subscribe to this channel. Leave a comment and tell us about a time you had to find your own plan B. And share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that the dirt is enough, that they are enough.